Hi, writers. I've made a lot of hay over the years as a writing teacher that the more we write about our pain, our trauma, our difficulties, the easier they get to bear, partially because we share them in my classes with a community of other people who have had some iteration of the same experience, maybe not in the same exact area of their lives, but human pain is universal. Today, I'm going to read something from something I wrote. This is a book I wrote, a memoir called Broken, a love story about the many years I spent in and around the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming with an amazing man named Stanford Addison, who was a quadriplegic and also a horse trainer, some would say horse whisperer, and a traditional healer. This is about a night I drove up to his house and found I couldn't go in, and here's why. This is writing about pain. This is about healing pain through writing. Let's review. Shortly after I first moved up here, I pulled up to Stan's house one dark, freezing night. There were maybe a dozen Chevy Cavaliers, Ford trucks, and Impalas parked outside. The sweat lodge was over, and the feast was in full swing. I hadn't participated because I was on my moon or menstruating. The steam pouring from the huge aluminum pot of stew I'd helped prepare that afternoon made the kitchen window run with thin strings of water. Through the window, I could see blurred figures moving around. Someone with a plate stopped and backtracked into the food line. Someone hugged someone else. I turned off my ignition and found I couldn't move. I couldn't move into that love. It would arrange me in such a way that I wouldn't recognize myself. And I didn't want to be unrecognizable to myself, so I drove away. I still didn't have enough receptors to fully receive the feeling I got around Stanford, but I was developing a few of them. They certainly weren't operational when I arrived here. Dr. Whyte's wife, Patty Outlaw, once said to me, "Physiology is at its greatest when you try to heal a wound, try to trick the body into healing." That seemed doubly true for wounds of the heart. All this time, my heart had remained as stubbornly invalid as Stanford's body. It had to be tricked into healing, and my adventures here were doing that. Tea break. But wait, they weren't wounds. They weren't so much something cut as something prevented. They were like stumps, stumps where limbs or muscle should have grown. Around Stan, my insides got warm. Something reared in my blood like the quicksilver devotion of a child, devotion combined with hope and fear, a real razor's edge of fear in every cell, and that this devotion would be dropped again, that it would bounce off the court while Stan was taking a water break. But he never was. He sat there watching. There was nothing else for him to do. He was in a wheelchair after all, but the man did love his work. Maybe it wasn't magic so much as it was God or the thing on the other side of the thing that is Stanford Addison. Or maybe it was simply the right kind of attention, which seems as ordinary as a bologna and mayo on Wonder Bread. Stan was made of attention. He gave it freely. He saw me, saw what I could do. He saw everyone else's too. This seemed ordinary, but it was actually extremely rare, maybe even rarer than magic. What I brought to the mix was devotion. Could it be brought out of the family icebox, defrosted and encouraged to make its shaky offering, this time in company it took 40 years to find? Company that melted my purest devotion right out of me, like modern mining techniques leach molecules of hidden gold out of heaps of gray rock. This was the upside of being a little girl. That was my Indian name. This pure childlike devotion that had been hidden, but which now had no choice but to come out. This time my heart unfurled, not because it felt ready, but because conditions were such that it was compelled to assume its original position. And that's what it felt like, my heart's original position. I'd been warming up to this for years and years by misfiring all over the place. I tried to get my boyfriends to help me do what needed to be done. those poor boyfriends. At every turn, I was asking for evidence that I was lovable, not just to them, but to my father, who happened to be dead. I wore a whole string of boyfriends into the dust, not knowing I was asking them to soothe a pain decades old, to correct a mistake that old. Since I didn't know this, my timing was less than perfect. Boyfriends tended to be unloading river rafts or flying to Massachusetts when the moments rather, arrived loaded with the full weight of the past. And they had problems of their own. They didn't need burdens piled on their backs while they slept, burdens unknown even to the woman tightening the straps. Dear me, the pack animals I'd made of people. I think there is a love that comes before and after and above and below romantic love. It is inextricably connected to surrender. More than anyone I've ever met, Stan practiced that kind of love. Sure, his body had been reduced to only what was required to sustain life. And maybe it was easier to practice this broader love in his culture, which had been severed from victory for so long, it had been freed up to explore humility in its various forms. Not expecting anything carries its own problems. But to me, coming as I do, from a culture that accepts nothing less than victory, nothing less than gain, in every single situation, this felt like freedom. I haven't read this in years. It's actually, boy. The love I felt for Stan had been driving me all along. It was inside me like a mineral. The thought of losing him made me cry. But to have tears flow relaxed my heart. The same heart that was slammed shut 15 years ago when I stood on a beach in Nova Scotia, drinking beer at my dad's wake, saying to my sister, "Do you feel anything? I don't feel anything." When I wrote that, it healed me because I named it. David Whyte says sometimes, articulate the nature of your exile and you're on your way home. And that's what I did right there. I articulated the nature of my exile and realized that it was changing in the presence of this amazing man. This culture so different than my own, but so much softer in some very important ways. So I offer to you, writers, writing's a real healing tool if you choose to use it that way. Thanks for listening. Take care.